Our scripture this morning is in Romans chapter 12, and actually I'm just going to be talking to you about verses 9 and 10 this morning. Three of the most powerful words in the English language have to be, I love you. I don't know if you've ever studied a foreign language, but it seems like one of the first things that you learn in the foreign language is how to say something similar to that. What a difference between saying, I like you, and I love you. If you're out on a date and your date says, I like you, yeah, that's okay. If your date says, I love you, you know this thing has gotten really serious. What a difference between saying, I need you, and I love you. How about, I want you, and I love you. We understand liking and needing and wanting to be something totally different from truly loving someone. You can love your car. You can love your tablet, your last haircut, your nails, your shop. You can love all sorts of things in this world. You can love your pet. You can love a good book. But is that the same thing as saying to the most important person in your life, I love you? I never saw anybody do a video of themselves kneeling in front of a car in the showroom and asking that car to become a part of their life for the next 5 years. Where's Ryan? What a trick you pulled, you and Bryce pulled on Lissy, huh? Anybody saw the Facebook of Bryce Batchelder proposing? And what were you hiding in? A Rubbermaid container. I'm sure Marissa says, yeah, I'd like to put him in a Rubbermaid container once or twice. And so would you have a hole cut in the side of it, or? No, I just kept it. Oh, yeah. And she never guessed. The one time, yeah. Well, you don't do that for anybody but somebody else, and only probably, hopefully, for one somebody else in your whole life. No wonder we think long and hard before we say those three words to a future wife or a future husband. I love you. But for love to mean anything, that kind of love, not simply the I need you, or I want you, or I like you, or I have to have you type of love, but this really deep giving of oneself, that love has to be sincere. How important is real, sincere love to God? Well, he made it the defining mark of his people. Jesus told his disciples in John chapter 13, just before he went to the cross, the supreme act of love on God's behalf for all of us, said in verses 34 to 35, a new command I give you. Now think about that for a minute. Jesus giving a command. What that says to us is that Jesus is functioning like Moses did when the children of Israel left Egypt and went out into the desert to go to the promised land. And here they are at Passover. They're celebrating that moment of liberation and that journey. They're eating bread that has not been, has not raised. It's unleavened. It's a flat little kind of cracker, which is the bread that was consumed during the journey. And what did Moses do? As soon as he got the people out to Mount Sinai, he gave them God's commands, what the Jewish people would call Torah. Now, Jesus says, a new command I give to you. In other words, a new Moses on a new Exodus, a new command for the new people of God. And what is that command? 3 words, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. You can't miss that command. He says, love one another. You must love one another. They'll know you're my disciples if you love one another. Now, the Jewish people, throughout all of its history up to that time, had been defined as a people by things like their ancestry. I don't know about you, but have you ever tried to read those long lists of names that tell you all the people that were born, you know, those Ancestry.com portions of the Bible? It'd be kind of fun to just do that for family devotions sometime and just watch everybody stumble as they go all the way around trying to say those names. But those names were important because those names allowed everybody to anchor themselves in the people of God. Ancestry was vital. You had to be a child of Abraham. To be part of the people of God meant to observe very, very strict rules about things like what day of the week you honored. The Sabbath was to be set aside. The rest of the world worked 7 days a week. You didn't. You stood out. You were different, and it showed the world that you were a part of God's family. The circumcising of male infants was the mark of the covenant. Nobody else did that kind of thing, or virtually nobody else did. Certainly at Jesus' time, the Romans and the Greeks did not. They thought it was a form of mutilation. And Jewish people had been put to death by the Greek armies because they continued to serve God in this way. So to circumcise your child meant to demonstrate to the whole world who you belong to. And of course, then, how about all of the dietary laws? The foods you could or couldn't eat. You can read for yourself in the book of Leviticus. Very careful menus set out of what is acceptable and what is not. Now, the rest of the world enjoyed its bacon and its pork. In fact, pork was one of the major forms of protein in the various societies, but not for Jewish people. And so, how did you know you were part of the people of God? By your heritage, by how you spent your time, by what you ate, and even by the marking of your child as belonging to God. These were the ways that you distinguished that you were God's family. By this, people will know that you belong belong to God and to His family. And everybody who didn't do those things was considered foe. They were the outsiders, the pagans. In fact, worship in the Jewish temple was restricted only to people who were part of God's family, the Jewish people. So now here comes Jesus, the new Moses, saying, "A new command I give to you." And he's doing this on the celebration of Passover night. "By this everyone will know you are my disciples, if you love one another." What's Jesus saying? He's giving a new way of defining the people of God. He is saying no longer will God's people be defined by how they spend their Saturdays. No longer will God's people be defined by whether or not they eat pork or circumcise their children. No longer will they be defined by their heritage or their ancestry. All of that will be set aside, and you will be defined by the love of God, the true, deep, abiding love of God in your life, your love for each other. People will know you are a new people, that you're a unique people, that you are God's family by the way you treat each other. No wonder then that when we get to Paul, who expanded all of these ideas for us as he went from church to church, we discover that Paul says love better be the real deal. No counterfeits, no knockoffs. If we are truly God's new creation, then the one thing that distinguishes us must be for real. Love that is sincere all the way through. Now in Romans chapter 12, just 2 verses we're going to look at this morning, verses 9 and 10, we see Paul lay out for us the core values of real love. 3 things. I'm sure there are many others we could talk about. But 3 things that tell us what love has to look like and act like. So number 1, real love is committed to what is good. Romans chapter 12, verse 9 puts it this way. Love must be sincere, hate what is evil, cling to what is good. To understand what real love, God's love, is like, Paul says, first of all, we need to understand that love always holds to what is good. You see, God, the Creator, made a good world. How do we know that? Well, it's repeated for us 6 different times in the very first chapter of the Bible. When He created light, He looked and said, "It is good." And when He created the sky and the water separated, it was good. And He created the dry land, He said, "It's good." And as He filled His world with all the different things that we now take for granted, in each case He said, "They're good." And then when He created people, He said, "Very good." Goodness is cooked into the creation. We need to be very careful that we don't fall into a mindset of thinking that the creation or some parts of it are evil and other parts may be good, or maybe the whole thing just needs to be scrapped. God's creation is good. And that's why Paul says, you better hang on to what is good. You better hang on to what is good and hate what is not good, hate what is evil. Now, he's not saying hate people who are evil. That's where we always fall into the trap of personalizing evil. He says, hate what is evil. I think of those medical people working under deplorable conditions in Western Africa right now, fighting Ebola.
Now, here is this disease that is, 70, 80% fatal. And they're working in places where they have almost, in many cases, none of the things that we take for granted. Healthcare workers without even having gloves, much less the other protective equipment. Now, as they do their work, if they're going to be successful, they have to be very clear about the difference between getting infected and not getting infected with Ebola. A doctor or a nurse who contracts Ebola is not going to be of any use to anybody else, but becomes part of the problem now, one more patient rather than one who gives life. And so they put on the suit if they have it, and certainly if they can be outfitted properly, not any part of their body is exposed. Everything is filtered going into their lungs. Why? Because if you want to put it this way, they hate what is evil, that virus that can destroy a human life, so that they can cling to and love what is good. A human being made in God's image who is suffering from this disease and needs to be set free. You and I need to have clear boundaries between good and evil. You cannot love someone sincerely if you bend your moral values to somehow make an exception, blur what is right and blur what is wrong. You can love a person and disagree with them. We all disagree with each other, probably about a whole lot of things. My wife and I probably find something every day we don't see quite eye to eye on. We love each other deeply. But when something wrong comes in to either of our lives, say if I make a mistake or say a wrong thing or whatever, she needs to be able to call that out, doesn't she? If she really loves me. And so first thing about love always clings to what is good. Second thing, we read, and frankly, let me add one more verse to that. 1 Corinthians 13:6 is a verse that we find in the middle of Paul's love chapter, the poem about love. And it's interesting to see what he says here about love in Romans 12, and then go over to chapter 13 in 1 Corinthians and see that his mind was in the same place. 1 Corinthians 13:6 says, "Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth." Real love begins with a love for all that's good. Push that one step further. I remember many years ago riding along with a fellow worker. This was a missionary at that time, and I was brand new to this missionary setting, and he'd been there forever. And we were riding along, driving for hours across Uganda. Nobody around, fortunately. It was a bad time to be driving through there. And he was telling stories about just stuff that had gone on. And we got on to some story about some situation that went wrong. And he caught himself. And instead of going down the dark path of rehashing some old hurt or telling some tale of woe about what this person had done, he said these words that stuck with me. If you want to see something bad about a person, you can always find it. But if you want to see something good about a person, you can always find that too. Wow. Think about those relationships, those people that you need to love. And you know, God's saying, attitude check here. Hate what is evil. Don't even let it into your mind. Go cling to what is good. Find that and focus on how that can grow. Second thing I want you to see, that Paul wants us to see, is that real, true love springs from the heart. It has to be genuine and it has to show. It's not just something in the back of our minds. Romans chapter 12, the first half of verse 10 says, "Be truly affectionate in showing love for one another." To love someone means more than simply tolerating their existence. It's not just a theological point that you say, oh yeah, okay, yes, I have to love this person and that person and so on. I don't like them, I don't want to be around them, but I love them. You ever have somebody pull that one on you? I really love you. I don't agree with you and I don't really like you, but I love you with Jesus' love. And you're going, what? How does that work? What you said about me yesterday doesn't seem to sound like what you're saying right now. Real love will open its heart to another person. It means to go out of our way to show them that we appreciate and value them. You think about it, when your child is hurting, even if your child did something for which you might say, they probably had that one coming. You don't just express your love by leaving a note on the refrigerator. Daddy loves you, just in case they happen to walk by and wonder. No, you see your child hurting, what do? You scoop that child up Again, even if you're like, you're not really happy with what they did, but you say, no, this is a time, this human being, this child of mine needs to know and feel and experience love. And so you shut down what you're doing and you put that child in your lap, or you take them for a walk. Maybe you take them out for an ice cream or something like that. You spend some time. Many years ago, I was having trouble getting to work on time because my oldest daughter had to go to work with me. Now that's power. You are like in first grade and you control whether daddy gets to work or not. Believe me, it wasn't lost on a little 6-year-old. We were late every single morning. And I was in a situation where that put her late for school, me late for work, and it was one of those situations where you weren't supposed to be late. I mean, people were watching to see whether you got there on time. How do you love that kind of behavior? Well, first of all, I said, now wait a minute, this isn't acceptable behavior. I said this to myself and my wife. We had to hate what was evil, cling to what is good. But now how do we help this child who's just a little kid and probably doesn't want to go to school that day anyway? How do we show her that we love her and move this project forward? And God gave me this really interesting thing to do. I said to her, you know what? If we can get to work on time every day this week, we'll leave extra early on Friday and we'll go to McDonald's, which is on the way to school, and you can order any breakfast you want. I'll never forget. Her little eyes went that big. And she got up every morning 4 days in a row, and she was up extra early on Friday, and we were in that car, and we sat there, and I can still see her with, remember the McDonald's pancakes in the little plastic tray, and she sat there across from me in the booth and had me all to herself. And you know what? That's what that turned out to be all about. She felt loved. She felt loved. She felt special. It was such a big deal that, of course, she bragged about it to her brother and her sister. And so that meant I went to McDonald's every week with a different kid. It's got to show. Love is a light in a dark world. It's got to light something up. So ask yourself, in some situation, maybe where you're struggling to show genuine love, is it showing? How would this other person know that I care? I don't want them. Maybe you don't want them to know. Well, then say, Lord, how should I see this person? What should I do? Little things can go such a long way. We'll talk in just a moment about the different ways we can express that love. Third thing I want you to see is that love always shows respect. Paul says in the second half of verse 10, compete with each other in giving mutual respect. Sincere love means more than just being affectionate. It means demonstrating a deep respect for that other person as a man or a woman made in God's image. You're respecting God in some sense when you show respect to the people that He created. It means always remembering that the people we love have a right to be the people who they are, not just a projection of what we want them to be. And even when things go wrong, as they often do, if we love them, we're going to respect them. We're going to respect their right to have their point of view, even if we don't agree. And even if, like point number 1, we have already in our minds separated what is good and what is evil, and we know that this person's on the wrong path, we're going to respect their right to make choices. Listen to how Paul puts it. Listen for the idea of respecting someone in 1 Corinthians 13, 4 and 5. These are not the words you always find in Valentine's cards, but they would be good there. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. There's that respect highlighted. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Now, Paul here is talking about loving someone when things aren't always going well. When do you need patience in a relationship? Hello? Not when things are hunky-dory. Not when we're both stretched out on a towel on the beach there and just watching the world go by. But again, When you need to be in the car at 8:15 and somebody hasn't gotten dressed for school yet. You can have an explosion, you can rant and rave, or you can say, love dictates a path of patience and of working this thing out. Love is kind and does not envy. What if this other person gets a better job than you have, or makes more money than you make, or gets credit for something that you did, or has the stuff that you always wanted? Can you love that person, or do they sort of go in this category of people that you have an attitude toward? If we take that attitude, then we're not respecting them for who they are. Does not boast, is not proud, does not dishonor others. What an awesome reality check God gives us here. When we envy or brag, we disrespect others. When we walk in and tell all the stories about ourselves and leave other people out, or make them just sit there and listen to our self-congratulations, what are we saying about them? How different to look to them and ask some questions and let them talk about what's going on in their lives. When we're selfish or we're angry, what do? We box the world in so that it's all about me and my point of view and my rights and my this and my that. And we all do this. No wonder Paul says, love will take you on a new path. And how about keeping score? How about keeping score? When we keep score for wrongs done to us, the danger is that we will say that this person is being valued by the score we assign them instead of by the fact that they are made in the image of God. Some people will figure you out on that one, and they'll run the score up just to get your goat. That happens in families too, doesn't it? You're a scorekeeper, they want attention. I remember one of my kids saying to my wife, negative attention is better than no attention at all. And when I thought about that, I go, whoa, that's really true. So if I could show some good attention, maybe we won't get to the negative stuff that tends to self-defeat this whole process. Love always shows respect. Your life is filled with people who need your sincere love. They may be family members, they may be people at work, they may be people who are part of our church family. So to live out that love, let's review. Number one, cling to what is good. That means never compromising your values in an attempt to coerce or earn love. It means never doing something wrong as a way to showing someone you care about them. As God's people, we can trust the good Creator who built goodness into His world and revealed that goodness to us. Isn't that really what the Bible does? It shows us what goodness looks like, even in a broken world. We can trust that He will show us a way to love each other that affirms the goodness that He built into the world and that He wants to restore into our lives, not in spite of it. We live in a world that has abandoned the notion of a true distinction between good and evil. Everything's become relativized and personalized. And it's very confusing. And so when we want to try to show love to someone, the message is that we have to drop our value system, especially as Christians. I want to tell you, no, you don't have to drop your value system at all. You need to have God's value system. Don't have your own, but have God's. But that doesn't mean that we then sort people out into unacceptable versus acceptable categories. It just means that we go about loving with a true understanding of who we are, a true understanding of who God is. Show your affection. Number two, love is an action word. It's a verb. Sincere love can't be hidden. It has to be acted upon. You're probably familiar, many of you, with Dr. Gary Chapman and his teaching on the 5 love languages. If you aren't, it'd be a good thing for us to do again every so often, whether we're talking about husbands and wives, whether we're talking about getting along with other adult friends, whether we're talking about our children or our teens, whatever the case. The 5 love languages are these: words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time and physical touch. Don't have time to go into all of those, but you have a primary love language, Dr. Chapman says, a way that you best experience love or tend to experience it most often. Guys, I can just tell you right now, most of the ladies in this room and in your life see quality time as way more important than you do. In about a week, quality time for a lot of us guys is going to be either on Channel 3 or on Fox 44. And that may or may not be quality time around your house. For some of us are wired to most appreciate getting stuff done, having people who help us. In some relationships, frankly, doing the dishes is better than a hug. Because if that is a strong love language for the person who normally has to do the dishes, then that's a way of saying I love you. Words of affirmation, very big on my love language quotient. And I'll tell you a little secret about words of affirmation. That means saying something nice about somebody to them. If words of affirmation are your strong suit, words of defamation cut deeper than everything else. Just as not doing the chores says, I don't love you, if a person experiences love through having the chores being done or not spending time. Some of us are wired to experience love and give love by giving gifts. And so that little surprise, that little thing that you pick up, it's not so much the quality, the value of it, but the thought of it will shout, I love you. And to somebody else, it's not a big deal. You've got to learn how each other works. But the main thing is that we show love, genuine, true affection for each other. Show respect, number 3. It's funny how fuzzy boundaries can become when it comes to the people who are closest to us. One of the ways we can go wrong, not even meaning to, is to see people, and we all end up doing this, as an extension of ourselves, especially the people that you hang around with the most, especially people like your spouse or like your kids. We tend to just assume that they think the way we do, that they're an extension of us. And in so many ways, when children are small, they really are. But when we do that, we all too often forget to respect them as unique expressions of God's image. One of the greatest tests of parenting comes when, some of you are experiencing right now, a son or daughter is no longer a little child you can scoop up into your lap or tell when to go to bed. There comes a time when that child becomes a young woman or a young man, a high school student, and ultimately a person who goes off perhaps to school or into the workforce, an equal, a peer. Let me tell you a little secret. When that happens, one of the biggest ways you're going to show your child that you love them is by showing them respect, by having boundaries, by talking about those boundaries. And if you haven't figured it out by the time the first grandkid comes along, you're going to get a crash course real quickly, especially if mom is a daughter-in-law to you, for instance, who has her own way of thinking about what it means to have a child. And you just want to come in there and just to project yourself and your values and your way of doing things, just see how well that works. I think it's important for us to have conversations about the boundaries and about respecting each other. I take time with my kids, and of course they're all in their 30s now, to talk about that and to say, look, Mom and I see it this way. We don't want to make decisions for you. We don't ever want to crowd you. My wife just wrote a note to our new daughter-in-law just saying, we're here to support, but we don't ever want to put any pressure on you. We give you permission to be who you are. Now, will you always agree with the choices your kids make? No. But isn't that the test of respect? That we allow each other to be the unique expressions of God that we are, or we allow each other to make mistakes. And I want to encourage those of you who are in that transitional place where your children are now perhaps at that point where you're never really going to get back to where you're telling them what to do. Build respect now into that relationship. Build that kind of love. They want that from you as an older person. I'm speaking now to parents. They want to know, probably more than anything else, that you respect them. Certainly that you love them, but that you love them enough to respect them. The story of God's relationship with the first people he created is a story of love in action. Think about it. In his relationship with Adam and Eve, God never blurred the line between good and evil. In fact, he explicitly commanded them to choose the good. He set up a test. He said, here it is for you in simple terms. Do all these things, eat from all the trees of the garden, good. Eat from this one tree, the knowledge of the good and evil, the test tree, bad. So God was clarifying what good meant in his good creation and in a good relationship with him. And when they failed, he called them out on it. He didn't say, they were just the first humans I ever created. I'll cut them some slack. No, he came right on in and found them and talked it through, and there were consequences, but he didn't give up on them. Second thing, God did not simply love human beings from afar. We read in Genesis chapter 3 that he walked with them in the garden every day in the cool of the evening. Personal, quality time. God spent time with them, talked with them. When they found themselves in shame and guilt, he prepared clothing for them from animals that sort of prefigure the first sacrifices. Took care of his people, even though they were now fallen. And yet, thirdly, God never ceased to offer to Adam and Eve or all the rest of us deep respect for who we are and the choices that we make. We have the freedom to choose between good and evil, just like they did. Think about that. When he put up that test for them, he was saying, I respect you as being made in my image with with the ability of moral choice. Choose wisely. If you don't, we'll have to deal with the consequences. But he respected them enough to give them that freedom. He respects you enough to give you that freedom. He's never given up on humans that he created. Think about that gift of love, sending Jesus into this world to be that new Adam, the beginning of a whole new family, renewed people. Jesus came, never ever blurred the line between good and evil, but never wrote anybody off, did he? Jesus came, showed affection. A leper comes and says, if you want to, you can make me clean. And it says Jesus touched him, the unthinkable. Goes into the body of where a young man is being carried out for a funeral, and he touches the coffin, contaminating himself with death, except that in Jesus' case, he was giving the gift of life. Jesus showed respect right to the cross. He could look at the people who were cursing him to his face and say, Father, do what? Forgive them. They don't even know what they're doing. That's the kind of love that God showed to you and me. And you know what? That's the kind of love he wants to show through you and me to others. He wants us to be his love letter to people in this world. A letter that's filled with this kind of love, and a letter that can be signed sincerely yours in every sense of that term.